Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Paul Butler, and I represent the United States of America. That's how I used to start my opening statement. I used to love to say that because it made me feel powerful. I represented the United States of America in a criminal court, and I used that power to put poor Black and Latino people in prison. Like a lot of prosecutors, that's pretty much all I did. But during the time I did that work, I learned some things that profoundly changed the ways that I viewed my responsibilities as a lawyer and as a person who believes in the promise of America. During the time that I was a prosecutor, most of the jurors were Black like me. They were these elderly Black people who would come to the courthouse in their Sunday going to church clothes. And they expected that the defendant was going to be Black, and they were right. But what they hadn't expected was this other Black man in the courtroom in a suit and tie, talking about his name is Paul Butler, and he represents the United States of America. And these old Black jurors, they would beam at me like they were thinking, "You go, boy. You represent the United States of America." Here's the thing. Works some of the time, but not all of the time. During training, we rookie prosecutors were warned that sometimes we persuade these jurors beyond a reasonable doubt that the bad guy, that's what we call him, bad guy Cretan, was guilty, but the jurors would still acquit. And they would do this because they didn't want to send another Black man to jail. We were told we'd see this mainly in drug cases, almost never in cases of violent crime. And when these experienced prosecutors told us this, they kind of rolled their eyes like, these DC jurors. Here we are trying to get these bad thugs off the street, and they don't have the good sense to convict these Cretans. And you know what, they were right. We rookies, we tried our cases, and we mainly respected the jurors, but sometimes they would discuss us. We knew the Cretan was guilty, they knew he was guilty, but they would vote to acquit. When I left the prosecutor's office and started teaching law, it was the first thing I wanted to study. You know what? I came to see that these old Black people, 2 or 3 generations out of slavery, the last time they'd been at the courthouse, it wasn't being a jury, it was for the sentencing of their grandbaby. I came to see that these jurors were absolutely right. What they were doing was in the highest tradition of justice. They responded to the law that called their grandbabies Cretans with the power they had. For once, they actually had a little bit of power. And when they got that power, they used it the best way that they knew how. So I came to think of these jurors with the same respect that I think of the white northern jurors who acquitted in the fugitive slave cases. Okay, back to reality. I was prosecuting drug dealers, not fugitive slaves. How crazy is it to compare our criminal justice system to the injustice of slavery? Well, here's the thing. When these DC jurors looked at this guy, they still saw a Black man in chains. And they knew that he was up to no good hanging out in the corner, but they also could remember when he was a little kid. This is the same guy who used to drive his grandmother to kidney dialysis. They remember when he was 10 years old waiting on his porch because his daddy was coming. He was so excited. And he waited and waited, and his daddy never came. And all of these memories came flooding back when they looked at this other young man on trial. And the law said they weren't supposed to think about that, but again, for once they had a little bit of power over the law. So they used that power the best way they knew how. Ladies and gentlemen, will you have the courage to use your power when you're a juror? Jury nullification is legal, it's powerful, and it has proven results in making the law more fair. The power to nullify comes from the Bill of Rights, specifically the part that says you can't be tried for the same crime twice. The Supreme Court has ruled that when someone is found not guilty of a crime, that's the end of the case. Even if the evidence says that the guy is guilty, there's nothing that anyone can do, not even the judge, not even the Supreme Court. Only works one way in favor of not guilty verdicts. If there's evidence that someone who's convicted is innocent, a court can reverse that. It just can't reverse a not guilty verdict, that is. So the idea is that prosecutors are supposed to be a check on government power, especially the prosecutor power. All jury nullification does is recognize that God does not make the law. Our crazy federal drug laws were made by people like Jesse Helms. Trent Lott, Larry Craig, our inspector. These are people who are sometimes right, sometimes wrong. When they're wrong under the law, jurors have the power to step in and say, wait a minute, you've gone too far. It's part of this constitutional design of checks and balances. During the 1880s, again, because it's totally legal, jurors were actually told about this power in criminal cases. They were told they could nullify when the law was unfair. All it did was make prosecutors more careful about the cases that they invented. It was all good. But along came the Industrial Revolution. Corporations got scared about ordinary citizens having so much power. And that's where the Supreme Court decided this bizarre case. Okay, this is some really weird Da Vinci Code angel and demons type shit, so listen carefully. In 1895, the Supreme Court says that nullification is a power that jurors have, but they don't have to be told about this power. So it's kind of like a secret power. So now judges don't have to tell jurors that they have the power to nullify. It's legal, but you don't have to know about it. And there are way too many people in prison in the United States today. We lock up more people than any other country in the history of the world. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. Okay, so the main reason that the incarceration is going up is the war on drugs. 500,000 people locked up right now for non-violent drug offenses. They don't belong there. Again, when they go there for these nonviolent offenses, they hang out with all these murderers, rapists, and robbers. They come out a lot worse, make us a lot less safe. So, it's strategic nullification. It's focused on nonviolent drug cases. It's old school civil disobedience. It's like what Martin Luther King did at the lunch counter, only it's better because it's legal. So the point is to send the message that we the people, we're fed up, we're not going to take this crazy mass incarceration anymore. So here's the plan. If you're a juror in a case involving possession of a small amount of drugs, use or sale between consenting adults, vote not guilty, regardless of the evidence in the case. If there's a property crime, a crime involving violence, if you're persuaded beyond a reasonable doubt, then convict. You should convict. But if it's, again, a nonviolent drug crime, seriously consider acquitting. It's perfectly legal, has two great benefits. It safely reduces the rate of incarceration by eliminating from prison some of the people who shouldn't be there. And second, it sends the message that we the people want fundamental change in our justice system. This message goes out to lawmakers: stop passing these draconian, crazy criminal laws, and the prosecutors stop locking up all these people for nonviolent offenses. So jury nullification is not going to solve everything. It's just a tool in an arsenal for change. Just like the sit-ins, they weren't supposed to be the be-all and end-all. They were one tool for change. So in closing, when Barack Obama was in high school and college, he smoked marijuana, and you know what? He inhaled. He said he thought that was the point. I'm so glad that his criminality wasn't treated like the 800,000 people who get arrested every year for marijuana. Because if it was, he wouldn't have the opportunity to become the most powerful person in the world. And one way that you can help our communities be safer and American citizens be more free is to become a Martin Luther King juror.